This is part 4 of my video series on how to draw a realistic face. So we have already drawn the skin, nose and eyes, and in this video we will draw the lips. Then the next week we will move on to the neck before we finish the drawing by drawing the hair the week after that. So subscribe and hit the bell icon so you won't miss when I upload the last 2 parts. And yeah, without further ado, let's begin drawing the lips. So just like in the previous videos, we want to begin by using an HB pencil to create a base layer. I also make sure to fill in the line between the 2 lips so it doesn't fade away. And for the base layer, I look at the reference photo and I avoid using the pencil in the areas where the lips are more highlighted. You can see in the video in which places I use the pencil and where I don't. Then I blend it out with a Q-tip, and since the top lip doesn't have an obvious highlight, I blend on the entire lip. But at the bottom lip, I leave the area in the center since the highlight there is more prominent. I then make a second layer with the same pencil, and I start with the top lip and focus mainly on applying color where the shadows are in the reference photo. And I know that it may look in the reference photo like the lips are just one color, but if you zoom in on the photo and look carefully, you can see that there are actually slight variations in the shades. So that's what I'm looking at, and in general the shadows in the top lip are usually on the sides of the lips and right below the top arches of the lip, as well as right above the line that is between the 2 lips. After blending that out, I use the kneaded eraser to highlight some areas that I want to be slightly lighter. Then I use a blending stump to clean up the highlight before adding a bit more shadows and blending that out. And I also soften out that highlight that we made by sweeping a Q-tip over it. Then you can just go back in with the kneaded eraser and adjust the highlight if you feel like you need to. And just like before, we can use the blending stump to clean it up and sweep a Q-tip over it again to make it less intense. After that, I use the kneaded eraser to add highlights to the actual lips as well. I even create some vertical lines with it to add some texture. But since this highlight should not be as intense as the previous highlight that we made, I soften it out a little bit more with a Q-tip. Next, I use a 6B pencil to darken that line between the lips even more. And notice that I have made a tiny curve downwards on each outer side of that line. I then grab a 0.3mm mechanical pencil and draw some vertical lines on the top lip like we did with the kneaded eraser before. Because again, if you zoom in on the reference photo, you will notice that the lips have lines. And I mean, if you look at your own lips, you can see that lips have a texture that looks like lines. And you may also have some horizontal lines as well. And I mean, the basis is that we draw what we see in the reference photo. So yeah, draw whatever you see. Then I shade the bottom lip with a 2B pencil using the same principle as I did for the top lip. So I only apply color where the shadows are and then I blend it out. And also make sure to avoid that center highlight when you blend. Still using the 2B pencil, we can increase the shadow that is right at the bottom of the lip. Then blend that out with a blending stump. You can also increase the shadow that is below the lip, and here I think it's good to use both the blending stump and the Q-tip for blending. Next, I actually use a 2H pencil to draw some lines on the bottom lips as well. Keep in mind that you don't have to draw the lines in the exact positions as they are in the reference photo, but you want to make it as similar as possible at least. And the reason why I used a 2H pencil is because these lines should be more prominent and this pencil won't fade as much if we blend it. Then I used the kneaded eraser to create some highlighted lines right next to some of the lines that I just drew, but not all of them. And as you can see, this really makes those lines pop. Then I create some more shadows with either the HB or the 2B pencil, but you want to be careful to not fade away any of the lines that you just drew too much. I mean, a little bit is fine and it actually maybe make it more natural, but just not too much. And of course, you also need to be careful when you blend it out as well. At this point, I look at the reference photo and go back to add highlights with the kneaded eraser, and then I add shadows and lines with the HB pencil. And as I have mentioned before in the previous videos, it's important to look at the reference and see what's going on there, and then try to replicate that on the paper by using the techniques that I'm teaching you in this video series. Next, I go back in with the 6B pencil and darken up that line between the lips again. I then take a small blending stump to fix some shadows around the cupid's bow, and generally there is a shadow that is above the lips in the center as I'm drawing here, and then right below that there's usually a highlight that we drew before. Then you can take a white gel pen to accentuate some of the highlights in the bottom lip. You don't always need to use this pen. I think it really depends on how glossy the person's lips are, but in this case, her lips are slightly glossy, I think. And yeah, just make sure not to overdo it because that could also make it look a bit fake. In the end, I take the HB pencil to increase some shadows. I also use the white gel pen a bit more for the highlights. And yeah, I basically do this until I'm happy with how the lips look. I also took my 2H pencil and I drew a tiny freckle or maybe a birthmark in the cupid's bow area. So after you have adjusted the shadows and highlights and feel satisfied with the result, you're done with the face. I mean, we can of course adjust anything on the face after drawing the hair as well, because you know, when everything comes together, you may need to adjust some areas as I have talked about in the previous videos. But yeah, anyways, I hope this video was helpful for you, and don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe so you don't miss the next parts of this video series. And yeah, I want to thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video.